Marcus Washington, CEO of TechVision Enterprises, sits in his office staring at the Wall Street Journal headline. Washington cancels historic $4.1 billion merger with Aerotech Industries. He receives a call from Aerotech's CEO begging him to reconsider. Marcus hangs up and stares at the viral video on his phone, him being forcibly removed from first class on an Aerosky flight despite showing his boarding pass multiple times. Sometimes the price of dignity is measured in billions, he whispers as he watches the video for the 100th time. What would you do if you had to choose between your self-respect and $4 billion? Before we continue this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from. If you believe in standing up for justice no matter the cost, hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on more incredible true stories of courage in the face of discrimination. Marcus Washington had always been a force to be reckoned with. Growing up on the south side of Chicago, he'd watched his single mother work 3 jobs to keep a roof over their heads in a neighborhood where success stories were as rare as snow in summer. But Marcus was different. His brilliant mind and unwavering determination had earned him a full scholarship to MIT, where he'd graduated top of his class in computer engineering. While his classmates accepted cushy corporate jobs, Marcus had a bigger vision. Starting in his tiny apartment with nothing but a laptop and an innovative algorithm, he founded TechVision Enterprises. The early years were brutal. Investors would schedule meetings, only to dismiss him when they saw the color of his skin. Great idea, they'd say, but we're looking for more experienced founders. The translation was clear. They couldn't picture a black man from the South Side as the face of the next tech giant. Marcus persevered, working 18-hour days, refining his technology until it was so revolutionary that even the most prejudiced venture capitalists couldn't ignore it. By 35, his face was on the cover of Fortune magazine. By 40, TechVision had expanded into artificial intelligence, clean energy, and advanced transportation systems, with offices in 17 countries and over 5,000 employees. Today should have been the crowning achievement of his career. After months of intense negotiations, TechVision was finalizing a historic $4.1 billion merger with Aerotech Industries, a leading aerospace manufacturer. The deal would be the largest black-owned acquisition in tech history, a watershed moment that would open doors for countless minority entrepreneurs. Marcus had spent the morning in his Chicago headquarters, finalizing the details with his executive team. The champagne was already on ice for the announcement scheduled for tomorrow morning. The San Francisco meeting is just a formality, Victoria Chen, his chief of staff, assured him as she handed him his first-class boarding pass for Aerosky, Flight 1342. The Aerotech board already approved everything. They're just excited to shake your hand and take the publicity photos. Marcus nodded, straightening his perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit. I know, but I want to look them in the eye when we close this. My grandfather couldn't even enter a bank through the front door. Tomorrow I'm buying a billion-dollar company. The ride to O'Hare had been smooth, and his preferred status had whisked him through security. As he boarded the plane, the flight attendant at the door greeted him with the practiced smile reserved for first-class passengers. Marcus settled into seat 2A, placing his briefcase containing the final merger documents carefully under the seat in front of him, just as he was texting Ayanna, his wife of 20 years, that he'd boarded safely. A shadow fell across his phone. He looked up to see another flight attendant, her platinum blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, staring down at him with narrowed, blue eyes. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice carrying across the first-class cabin. "I need to check your boarding pass. I believe you may be in the wrong section." Marcus kept his expression neutral, a skill he'd perfected over decades of being the only black person in countless boardrooms. Without a word, he handed over his boarding pass, the one that clearly showed first class and seat 2A in bold letters. The flight attendant, whose name tag read Veronica Keller, examined it with exaggerated scrutiny, then looked from the pass to Marcus and back again, as if she couldn't reconcile the two. "Is there a problem?" Marcus asked quietly. "This is the first-class cabin," Veronica stated, still holding his boarding pass. "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" Around him, white passengers in equally expensive suits settled into their seats without being questioned. An older gentleman across the aisle watched the interaction with uncomfortable recognition in his eyes, but said nothing. Marcus felt the familiar knot of tension in his stomach, the one that appeared whenever he was reminded that no amount of success could shield him from prejudice. "Yes, I'm sure," he replied, maintaining his composure. "That's my boarding pass, which shows I'm in the correct seat." Veronica frowned, still unconvinced. "I'll need to see your ID as well." As Marcus reached for his wallet, he noticed several other passengers watching now, some with curiosity, others with discomfort. He'd been in this situation more times than he could count, but it never stung any less. Here he was about to make business history tomorrow, and today he still had to prove he belonged in a seat he'd paid for. Veronica scrutinized Marcus's driver's license with the intensity of a jeweler examining a suspected fake diamond. The other white first-class passengers pretended not to watch, some burying their faces in magazines, others suddenly fascinated by the safety card. But Marcus could feel their eyes, their curiosity, their judgment. Was this man truly one of them? Did he belong in their exclusive cabin? Or was he an intruder who had somehow slipped past the gatekeepers? "I still need to verify this," Veronica announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "These don't seem to match." Marcus took a slow, measured breath. "The name on my ID is Marcus Washington. The name on my boarding pass is Marcus Washington. The seat assignment is 2A. I am sitting in seat 2A. Veronica's lips thinned. "Sir, there seems to be a discrepancy in our system. I'm going to have to ask you to come with me to resolve this issue." "There is no discrepancy," Marcus stated firmly. "I'd like to speak to the captain or your supervisor." As if summoned, the captain emerged from the cockpit, his presence commanding immediate respect from the other passengers. Captain Bradley Stevens was tall, with silver temples and an authoritative bearing honed from years of military service before his commercial pilot career. He approached with a concerned expression that looked practiced. "What seems to be the problem?" Stevens asked, addressing Veronica rather than Marcus. "This gentleman's documentation doesn't match our passenger list for first class," Veronica explained, despite having no evidence of this claim. "I've asked him to deplane so we can sort it out, but he's being uncooperative." Marcus felt a flash of anger, but kept his voice steady. "Captain, my boarding pass and ID both confirm I'm assigned to this seat. I've shown both to your colleague, who seems determined to find a problem where none exists." Stevens barely glanced at Marcus's documents. Instead, he exchanged a look with Veronica that sent a chill down Marcus's spine. This felt coordinated, deliberate, not the random racism he'd dealt with all his life, but something more targeted. "Sir, for the comfort and safety of all passengers, I'm going to have to insist you deplane until we can resolve this situation," Stevens stated, with the finality of someone used to being obeyed. Marcus reached for his phone. "I'm going to record this interaction," he said, pressing the video button. "And I'd like your names and employee numbers." The atmosphere in the cabin shifted instantly. Veronica took a step back, her expression hardening. "Sir, recording is against company policy." "Actually, it isn't," called out a voice from across the aisle. A white businessman in his 50s had finally decided to speak up. "I fly Aerosky weekly. There's no policy against recording interactions with staff, and I've been watching this whole thing. This gentleman has shown his boarding pass twice now." Captain Stevens shot the man a cold look. "Sir, please stay out of this. It's a security matter." "It's a discrimination matter," the man replied, but his voice lacked conviction. As the captain's stare intensified, he slowly sank back into his seat. Stevens turned to Marcus. "Sir, you have two options. You can deplane voluntarily, or I can call security and have you removed." Marcus's heart pounded, but his mind remained clear. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about every person who looked like him who'd ever been humiliated despite playing by all the rules. "I have a first-class ticket. I am in my assigned seat. I have shown my ID. There is no legitimate reason for me to deplane." The captain's jaw tightened. He nodded to Veronica, who picked up the cabin phone. 3 minutes later, an air marshal and 2 security officers boarded the plane. By now, multiple passengers had their phones out, recording the scene. Marcus continued filming as well, capturing the moment when the air marshal approached him. "Sir, I need you to come with me," the officer stated. "On what grounds?" Marcus asked. "The captain has final authority over who flies on this aircraft. He's asking you to deplane." Marcus looked around the cabin, meeting the eyes of passengers who quickly looked away, unwilling to witness the injustice unfolding before them. Only a few continued recording, their expressions a mix of shock and discomfort. "I want it on record that I am being removed despite having a valid first-class ticket and identification, and despite having done nothing disruptive," Marcus stated clearly for his recording. The air marshal placed a hand on Marcus's arm. "Sir, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." With dignity that took every ounce of his self-control, Marcus gathered his briefcase and stood. As he was escorted down the aisle, past business class and through economy, he felt the burning stares of hundreds of passengers. Some looked embarrassed, some looked satisfied. Most simply looked away, unwilling to acknowledge what they were witnessing. What would you do if you witnessed someone being treated unfairly just because of their race? Would you speak up, or stay silent like most passengers on that flight? Comment number 1, if you believe we all have a responsibility to stand against discrimination when we see it happening. Like this video if you think Marcus showed incredible dignity in an impossible situation. And subscribe to our channel if you want to see justice served in stories like these. Do you think the airline staff had any idea who they were messing with and what was at stake? Let's find out what happened next. The moment Marcus Washington stepped off the plane, he knew his life had changed forever. Not because of the merger that wouldn't happen today, but because sometimes a single act of injustice can rewrite destinies. In the terminal, he found a quiet corner and reviewed the video he'd recorded. His hands trembled with a mixture of rage and resolve as he uploaded it to his personal Twitter account with a simple caption: "First class ticket, first class seat, removed from a Aerosky flight because I didn't look first class enough. CEO Heil Black." He hadn't mentioned his position or the merger. He didn't need to. The internet did that work for him. Within an hour, the video had been viewed 50,000 times. By the time he had secured a seat on a competitor's flight 3 hours later, that number had climbed to 500,000. When he landed in San Francisco, CEO Black was trending worldwide, and his phone was exploding with notifications, calls, and text messages. CNN was running the story. MSNBC had experts discussing racial profiling in airlines. Fox News was debating whether he should have just complied. The Wall Street Journal had already connected him to the TechVision Aerotech merger. Aerosky's stock had plummeted 15% by market close, wiping out nearly $2 billion in market value in a single afternoon. As his car service drove him to the Four Seasons, where the Aerotech board was anxiously waiting, Marcus's phone rang with a call from Richard Phillips, Aerotech's CEO. "Marcus, my God, I just saw the news." Phillips's voice was strained with barely contained panic. "Are you all right? This is unconscionable what happened to you." "I've been better, Richard," Marcus replied coolly. "I want you to know that Aerotech has absolutely no connection to Aerosky. We're as appalled as everyone else. This doesn't change anything about our deal, of course." But it did. It changed everything. As Marcus ended the call, his phone lit up with a barrage of interview requests. Good Morning America, The Today Show, 60 Minutes, The View. His PR team had drafted an official statement and was awaiting his approval. His executive vice presidents wanted an emergency meeting. The NAACP had reached out. So had the Urban League, Reverend Al Sharpton, and 3 U.S. senators. In the midst of this storm, a call came through from a number he didn't recognize. Normally, he would have ignored it, but something made him answer. "Mr. Washington? This is James Terrell. I'm Ms. Keller's supervisor at Aerosky." The voice was tight, artificial in its politeness. "I wanted to personally reach out regarding the unfortunate incident on today's flight." Marcus nearly laughed at the word unfortunate, as if what had happened was a spilled drink or a missed connection, not a deliberate act of humiliation. "We at Aerosky take customer satisfaction very seriously," Terrell continued, his voice a masterclass in corporate damage control. We'd like to offer you our sincere apologies, along with 10,000 bonus miles and upgrade vouchers for your next 3 flights with us. The insulting inadequacy of the offer momentarily robbed Marcus of speech. 10,000 miles and upgrade vouchers for public humiliation, for nearly derailing a $4.1 billion merger, for reinforcing that no matter how high he climbed, some would always see his skin color before his humanity. "Mr. Terrell," Marcus finally responded, his voice deadly calm, "you can keep your miles and your vouchers. What you can't keep is my business, or the business of my company, or the business of any company I do business with. And after today, that list is about to get much longer." He ended the call just as his car pulled up to the hotel. Through the windows, he could see the Aerotech executive team waiting anxiously in the lobby. These were men and women who'd spent months negotiating the merger, who stood to make millions in bonuses when it closed. They had nothing to do with what had happened on that plane. But as Marcus stepped out of the car, a clarity he hadn't felt in years washed over him. This wasn't just about him being removed from a flight. It was about a system that allowed it to happen and expected him to accept apologies and vouchers in return. It was about being expected to compartmentalize racism as an unfortunate incident and move on with business as usual. His phone buzzed, with a text from Victoria, his chief of staff. "Emergency call with our board in 30 minutes. They're nervous about the merger after today's incident. Need your direction." Marcus took a deep breath and made a decision that would send shockwaves through Wall Street and beyond. He typed back, "Tell them I'm putting the merger on hold indefinitely, effective immediately." The Four Seasons presidential suite had transformed from what should have been a celebration venue into a war room. Marcus sat at the head of the mahogany conference table, surrounded by stunned Aerotech board members, whose expressions ranged from disbelief to barely concealed fury. "This is a massive overreaction," Gerald Whitman, Aerotech's chairman, declared. His ruddy face had grown progressively redder during the hour-long emergency meeting. "What happened on that plane was unfortunate, Marcus, and you have every right to be upset. But to jeopardize a $4.1 billion deal that benefits both our companies? That's not sound business judgment. That's emotion-clouding reason." "With all due respect, Gerald," Marcus responded, his voice steady, "if I were white, you wouldn't call it emotion. You'd call it principle." The room fell uncomfortably silent. Richard Phillips, Aerotech's CEO, attempted a more diplomatic approach. "Marcus, we all support you taking legal action against Aerosky. Hell, we'll even join you in boycotting them for corporate travel. But this merger took 18 months to negotiate. There are 30,000 jobs potentially impacted. Shareholder value, market expectations. Surely we can separate a personal incident from business." Personal incident. The phrase hung in the air, minimizing what had happened, stripping it of its significance. How convenient it was for those who'd never experienced discrimination to categorize it as personal rather than systemic. "Imagine," Marcus said, looking each board member in the eye, "arriving at the most important meeting of your career after being publicly humiliated and removed from a plane simply because of how you look. Then imagine being told that your reaction is emotional and disproportionate. What happened wasn't just about me. It's about a reality that people who look like me face every day, regardless of our accomplishments or positions." Back at TechVision's headquarters in Chicago, Marcus's executive team was equally divided. On an emergency video conference that evening, the tension was palpable. "The stock is already down 7% in after-hours trading," warned CFO David Marshall. "If we actually cancel this merger, we're looking at a potential 20 to 30% drop. That's billions in market cap. Pension funds, individual investors, employees with stock options. They'll all take a massive hit." "So we just swallow this insult because it's profitable to do so?" countered Zoe Jackson, TechVision's general counsel and one of the few black executives on the team. "What message does that send to our employees of color? That dignity has a price tag, and if the number is high enough, principles don't matter." The debate raged on, with Marcus listening more than speaking. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Senator Reynolds would like a word. Urgent matter regarding today's unfortunate events. Within minutes, his private line rang. Marcus, James Reynolds here, came the smooth, practiced voice of the three-term senator, known for his close ties to major corporations. I wanted to reach out personally about this misunderstanding with Aerosky. Misunderstanding. Another minimization. Another attempt to reframe what had happened. I've known Nathan Brooks, Aerosky's CEO, for years, Reynolds continued. He's devastated about what happened and assures me the employees involved will be properly disciplined. I'd be happy to facilitate a private meeting between you two, smooth things over, and get this merger back on track. We don't want to let one regrettable incident derail a historic business achievement, especially one so important for minority business leaders. The subtle manipulation wasn't lost on Marcus. The implication that canceling the merger would hurt all minority executives, that he owed it to his community to proceed regardless of how he'd been treated. I appreciate your concern, Senator, Marcus replied, but this isn't a matter that requires political intervention. Sometimes these situations need a neutral third party, Reynolds pressed. Nathan is prepared to make this right. Is he? Marcus asked. Because I've been doing some research this afternoon. Aerosky has 76 discrimination complaints, filed by passengers in the last 3 years alone, 17 by employees. They've settled 4 lawsuits out of court with NDAs. What happened to me wasn't an isolated incident. It's a pattern. The senator fell silent for a moment. All the more reason to use your position to effect change from within the system, wouldn't you say? This merger gives you incredible leverage. Before Marcus could respond, his assistant knocked urgently on his hotel room door. Victoria entered, her expression grim, and handed him a tablet. On the screen was a freshly published statement from Aerosky CEO Nathan Brooks. Aerosky regrets the misunderstanding that occurred on Flight 1342 today. We strive to provide excellent service to all our passengers and take allegations of discrimination very seriously. The incident appears to have resulted from a computer error that showed an incorrect seat assignment. Our staff was simply following standard verification protocols. We apologize for any inconvenience to Mr. Washington and hope to welcome him aboard again soon. Marcus read it twice, his blood pressure rising with each word. A computer error, verification protocols, inconvenience, not a single acknowledgement of discrimination, not a word about the staff's behavior, not even a direct apology. Just corporate doublespeak designed to placate the public while admitting nothing. Inconvenience, Marcus repeated softly, handing the tablet back to Victoria. Being caught in the rain is an inconvenience. Having your flight delayed is an inconvenience. Being humiliated because of your race is not an inconvenience. He turned back to the phone. Senator, I appreciate your call, but I have another matter to attend to. As he hung up, Marcus made a decision. This wasn't going away with political intervention or corporate apologies. This was just beginning. And if Aerosky, Aerotech, and their powerful allies thought he would quietly accept being treated as less than human for the sake of a business deal, they were about to learn exactly who they were dealing with. It was nearly midnight when Victoria Chen knocked on Marcus's hotel room door. The chief of staff's normally impeccable appearance was disheveled, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and vindication. You need to see this, she said, striding past him and opening her laptop on the desk. I've been digging into connections between Aerosky and Aerotech all night. There's something very wrong here. Marcus joined her at the desk, exhaustion momentarily forgotten as Victoria pulled up a series of documents and social media screenshots. Look at this, she said, pointing to a LinkedIn page. Thomas Keller, Veronica's husband, is VP of Strategic Partnerships at Aerotech's subsidiary, Skyworks Manufacturing. And here, she continued, clicking to another screen, Captain Stevens' brother-in-law is James Harrison, Aerotech's Director of Acquisitions. Marcus frowned. That could be coincidental. Atlanta's a hub for both aviation and tech. I thought so too until I found this. Victoria pulled up phone records she'd obtained from a contact in telecommunications. 3 calls between Captain Stevens and Michael Reynolds, Aerotech's executive VP, in the 48 hours before your flight. And this text message from Reynolds to Stevens this morning. The message read, Make sure W doesn't make SF meeting. Handle it quietly. Usual arrangement. Marcus felt a chill run through him. They planned this. Victoria nodded grimly. I think someone at Aerotech wanted this merger to fail, or at least wanted to put you at a disadvantage. They used their connections at Aerosky to create this incident, probably assuming you'd be delayed, embarrassed, but still proceed with the deal from a weakened position. But why? Marcus asked, mind racing. Aerotech needs this merger as much as we do. Their military contracts are drying up and our civilian tech applications give them a new market. Not everyone benefits equally, Victoria pointed out. There's a faction on their board led by Harrison that's been resistant from the beginning. They've been looking for a way to either kill the deal or renegotiate terms. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from a blocked number. Know your place. Some heights aren't meant for your kind. Walk away or worse comes next. He showed it to Victoria, whose expression hardened. They're threatening you. They're afraid, Marcus corrected. They orchestrated what they thought would be a minor incident, and now it's blown up into a PR nightmare and a potential deal breaker. They're scrambling. Victoria was about to respond when her own phone chimed with a news alert. She pulled it up and cursed softly. Marcus, TechVision stock is down 12% in pre-market trading. There are rumors circulating that the company has undisclosed financial problems, and that's why you're hesitating on the merger. False rumors, Marcus said. Someone's manipulating the market. It gets worse, Victoria continued, scrolling through her phone. Look what just leaked to the press. She turned her phone to show a mugshot of a much younger Marcus, maybe 19 or 20, looking defiant in an orange jumpsuit. It was an image Marcus hadn't seen in decades, one he'd believed was expunged from his record. Black CEO's criminal. Past exposed, read the headline from a right-wing news site. Washington arrested for assault during college protest. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. The assault had been pushing back against a police officer who was beating a fellow student during a peaceful campus protest against the university's investments in apartheid South Africa. The charges had been dropped, the record sealed. Someone had gone to great lengths to dig this up. They're trying to assassinate my character, Marcus said quietly. Make me look like an angry black man with a criminal past so that when I cry racism, no one believes me. What do we do? Victoria asked. Marcus was silent for a long moment, staring at the evidence of conspiracy laid out before him. This wasn't just about a single incident of discrimination anymore. This was coordinated, deliberate, and reaching into every aspect of his life and business. Someone was willing to go to extraordinary lengths to put him in his place. We fight back, he finally said. But first, we need to find out exactly who we're fighting. Have you ever discovered that what seemed like a random incident was actually part of a larger plot? Comment number 1. If you've ever uncovered a hidden agenda behind someone's actions, hit that like button if you think Marcus is right to fight back against this conspiracy, and make sure you subscribe to see how he will turn the tables on those trying to sabotage him. The question now is, how deep does this conspiracy go, and just how far are these powerful enemies willing to go to? Stop, Marcus? Let's find out. The morning brought no relief, only evidence that the attacks were expanding beyond the professional into the personal. Marcus's phone rang at 6:37 a.m. with a call from his wife, Ayanna. Her voice, normally composed after years as one of Chicago's top neurosurgeons, trembled with barely controlled anger. They're going after Zara, she said without preamble, referring to their 16-year-old daughter. Someone leaked your address to a hate group online. They sent her direct messages on Instagram with pictures of our house telling her to watch her back because her dad doesn't know his place. Marcus felt his stomach twist. Is she all right? She's terrified, Ayanna replied. And it's not just online. When I dropped her at Westlake Academy this morning, there were parents whispering, students staring. The headmaster pulled me aside to express concern about potential disruptions due to your situation. Westlake Academy, the prestigious private school that had practically begged them to enroll Zara for the diversity she brought to their overwhelmingly white student body, was now treating her like a problem. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. I'll call the school, he promised, and I'm arranging for private security today. No one's going to hurt our family. There's more, Ayanna continued, her voice dropping. Dr. Landry called me into his office yesterday evening. There's suddenly a routine review of my department scheduled for next week. In 15 years, there's never been a routine review in the middle of a quarter. Dr. Landry was the chief of surgery at Chicago Memorial, where Ayanna had pioneered innovative techniques in pediatric neurosurgery. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. They're coming after my job, Marcus, she said quietly. Landry mentioned that some board members were concerned about controversy affecting the hospital's reputation. The systematic nature of the attacks was becoming clear. Not content to target just Marcus professionally, his enemies were going after his family, trying to isolate and pressure him from all sides. I'm coming home, Marcus decided. I'll be on the next flight. No, Ayanna's voice strengthened. That's what they want, for you to retreat, to show weakness. We can handle this. Just end it, Marcus. Find out who's behind this and make them pay. After ensuring security was in place for his family, Marcus headed to a breakfast meeting with his banking team. He'd known Lawrence Chen, TechVision's lead, banker at First National for over a decade. They'd weathered market crashes, expansions, and acquisitions together. But today, Lawrence couldn't meet his eyes. I'm sorry, Marcus, he said, sliding a document across the table. The risk committee has decided to reassess TechVision's credit facilities. Reassess, Marcus repeated flatly. You mean reduce? Lawrence gave a slight nod. Given the uncertainty around the Aerotech merger and the recent stock volatility, they've implemented enhanced monitoring protocols. We have $3 billion in cash reserves, Lawrence. Our debt-to-equity ratio is the healthiest in the industry. This isn't about risk. It's coming from above my level, Lawrence admitted. Someone's putting pressure on the bank. Back at TechVision's San Francisco offices, more troubling news awaited. Employees from both TechVision and Aerotech had been scheduled for integration meetings all week. But reports were coming in of Aerotech representatives making racially charged comments, questioning TechVision employees' qualifications, suggesting the merger was a diversity initiative rather than a sound business decision. It's systematic, reported Zoe Jackson, who'd flown in to support Marcus. They're creating a hostile environment, documenting every reaction, probably hoping someone loses their temper so they can claim there are cultural incompatibilities between the companies. Marcus had faced racism throughout his career, but never so coordinated, so multi-pronged. This wasn't just prejudice, it was warfare. The final blow came that afternoon. Victoria burst into Marcus's temporary office, her face pale. Samuel Zhang just had a private meeting with the Aerotech board, she reported. Marcus felt a cold wave of betrayal wash over him. Zhang was TechVision's largest individual investor, holding nearly 8% of the company. He was also the chairman of the compensation committee, with significant influence over Marcus's position. He's discussing terms for a hostile takeover, Victoria continued. They're going to try to oust you and proceed with the merger under new leadership that won't make a fuss about being thrown off a plane. Marcus stood at the window, looking out at the San Francisco skyline. In just 48 hours, his life had been turned upside down. His company was under threat. His family was being terrorized. His wife's career was in jeopardy. His banking relationships were crumbling, all because he'd had the audacity to demand basic human dignity. But if they thought this would break him, they had fundamentally misunderstood who Marcus Washington was. He'd fought his entire life against systems designed to exclude him. He'd built a billion-dollar company in the face of skepticism and prejudice. He hadn't come this far to be defeated by men who thought their power gave them the right to humiliate him. Call the team, he told Victoria. All of them. It's time to stop playing defense. The war room in TechVision's San Francisco office hummed with focused energy. Marcus had assembled his most trusted allies, Victoria Chen, Zoe Jackson, his general counsel, James Wilson, his chief technology officer, and two new additions, Eleanor Fisher, from the elite forensic accounting firm Fisher & Blackwell, and her team of financial investigators. I want every transaction, every shell company, every offshore account connected to Aerosky or Aerotech executives, Marcus instructed Fisher. Follow the money. People this arrogant always leave a trail. Fisher nodded sharply. We've already started. There are some interesting patterns in Aerotech's military contract bids from the last 3 years. Unexplained consultancy fees to companies that don't seem to exist except on paper. While Fisher's team dug into the financials, Marcus received an unexpected message from a secure email address. Information you need. Parking garage, level B3, 30 minutes. Against Victoria's protests, but with security personnel watching from a distance, Marcus met the anonymous source. A middle-aged white man in an expensive suit who introduced himself only as someone who still has a conscience. I'm on Aerosky's executive team, the man explained, handing Marcus a flash drive. What happened to you was planned, but it wasn't supposed to go viral. It's part of a larger pattern. They've been doing this to minority executives for years when certain business interests need them sidelined. The flash drive contained hundreds of internal Aerosky communications, emails, memos, text messages documenting a systematic practice of discriminatory treatment toward passengers who might pose competitive threats to certain corporate partners. Why are you giving me this? Marcus asked. Because my daughter showed me your video and asked why the man was being treated that way, the source replied simply. I couldn't give her an answer I could live with. Back at the office, the evidence from the flash drive provided crucial leads. Marcus's legal team began constructing a massive civil rights lawsuit, not just for him, but potentially as a class action on behalf of every minority passenger who'd faced similar treatment. Meanwhile, Marcus received a call from Claire Robinson, one of the country's most prominent civil rights attorneys. Her record of victories against corporate discrimination was unparalleled. You've stirred up a hornet's nest, Mr. Washington, she said when they met at her office. I've had 3 other executives reach out to me since your story broke, all with similar experiences on Aerosky. Will you represent us? Marcus asked. I'd be honored, Claire replied, her eyes fierce with determination. But you should know what you're getting into. These companies have deep pockets and deeper connections. They'll try to paint you as an opportunist, as playing the race card. They'll dig into every aspect of your life looking for dirt. Let them try, Marcus responded. I've got nothing to hide. As if to confirm Claire's warning, a barrage of hit pieces appeared in right-wing media the next day, questioning everything from TechVision's accounting practices to Marcus's childhood in Chicago. But for every attack, supporters emerged to counter the narrative. Most surprising was the young black flight attendant from Aerosky who contacted Marcus through Claire. Jasmine Turner had been working for the airline for just 7 months, but had already documented dozens of instances of discriminatory practices. The supervisors have a code they use, she explained during their meeting. When they say a passenger needs special handling, it means find a reason to remove them or downgrade them if they're, not the right kind of customer. And you've witnessed this personally? Claire asked, recording every word. Witnessed it? I've been ordered to do it, Jasmine confirmed. But I've been gathering evidence. I have names, dates, flight numbers. I even recorded my supervisor explaining the policy during my training. With each piece of evidence, each new ally, Marcus felt the momentum shifting. The breaking point came during his interview on National Evening News, when the anchor, Thomas Reynolds, attempted to suggest that Marcus had overreacted to standard security procedures. Standard procedures, Marcus repeated, his voice calm but unyielding. Is it standard procedure to only question the documentation of black passengers? Is it standard procedure to remove a passenger who has a valid ticket and identification? Or is it only standard when that passenger is black? Reynolds tried to interrupt, but Marcus continued. Since this happened, over 500 people have shared similar experiences with me. Are they all overreacting? Or is there a systemic problem that needs to be addressed? The interview went viral instantly, with clips shared millions of times across social media platforms. Stand with Marcus began trending worldwide. Civil rights organizations rallied to his cause. Celebrities and influencers shared their own experiences with racial profiling. For the first time since the incident, Marcus allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope. He wasn't fighting alone anymore, and with each person who spoke up, each piece of evidence uncovered, the true scope of the corruption began to emerge like a dark iceberg rising from the depths. The first sign that the counterattack had struck a nerve came in the form of a procedural ruling. Claire Robinson had filed their discrimination lawsuit in federal court, with Marcus as the lead plaintiff and potentially hundreds of others joining, a class action. But Judge William Harrington, a Reagan appointee with well-known connections to aviation and defense industries, issued a surprise ruling questioning whether the case met the requirements for class certification. "This is procedural obstruction," Claire explained to Marcus as they sat in her office. "Harrington's brother-in-law sits on Aerotech's board. We'll file for his recusal, but it will delay things." "How long?" Marcus asked. "Months, possibly. And that's just the first roadblock. They'll use every trick in the book." The legal maneuvering was just the beginning. That night, Marcus received a panicked call from James Wilson, his CTO. "Someone broke into Kevin's apartment," Wilson reported, referring to Kevin Zhang, TechVision's lead AI research engineer. "They took his work laptop and nothing else. Not his cash, not his personal laptop, not his watch. Just the computer with all our proprietary merger integration algorithms." Before Marcus could fully process this information, another blow landed. "Marcus Washington under IRS audit," announced the business newscrawler. A source close to the investigation claimed that TechVision had potentially misclassified certain R&D expenses to gain unfair tax advantages. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Later that day, Marcus was approached by Colonel Frank Miller, representing a government defense contractor that did significant business with TechVision. Their meeting was brief and to the point. "I respect what you're trying to do, Marcus," Miller said in his straightforward military manner. "But I need to be candid. There are concerns at high levels about TechVision's continued eligibility for certain classified contracts if this controversy continues." "You're threatening our government contracts because I objected to racial discrimination?" Marcus asked, incredulously. Miller's expression remained neutral. "I'm conveying information, not making threats. National security requires contractors who don't attract unnecessary attention." The message was clear. Drop the lawsuit, proceed with the merger, and stop making waves, or watch government contracts worth hundreds of millions disappear. Marcus had barely processed this implied threat when Victoria rushed into his office, her face ashen. "They've released audio," she said, connecting her laptop to the conference room screen. "It's all over the internet." The audio clip was of poor quality, clearly edited and possibly manipulated, but the voice was recognizably similar to Marcus's, stating, "These white employees just don't have what it takes. They're dead weight we need to cut once the merger goes through." "This is fabricated," Marcus stated, anger rising. "I never said this." "We know that," Zoe confirmed. "Our audio experts are already analyzing it, but the damage is being done. It's spreading like wildfire across right-wing media and social platforms. They're using it to paint you as the real racist." The coordinated nature of the attacks made it clear. Powerful interests were aligned against him, willing to use any means necessary to neutralize the threat he posed to their system. They would destroy his reputation, his company, his family's security, all to protect themselves from accountability. For a brief moment, Marcus felt a wave of despair. How could he, even with his resources, fight against forces this entrenched, this willing to cross ethical and legal lines? The system was designed to protect itself, to crush those who challenged it, no matter how justified their cause. But despair quickly hardened into resolve. If they were fighting this dirty, this desperately, it meant one thing. They were afraid. He was getting close to something they couldn't afford to have exposed. Have you ever witnessed powerful people or organizations fight viciously to avoid accountability? Comment number 1. If you believe the truth always eventually comes to light, no matter how hard some try to hide it. Hit the like button if you think Marcus is right not to back down, despite these increasingly dangerous attacks. And don't forget to subscribe to see how this high-stakes battle continues. Do you think Marcus can find enough allies to take on such powerful enemies? Or will the pressure eventually become too much for even him to bear? Let's continue to find out. Marcus Washington had always understood the power of alliances. As a black man navigating predominantly white spaces, he'd learned early that sometimes survival depended on finding the right allies. Now, facing a coordinated attack from some of the most powerful entities in corporate America, he needed allies more than ever. The first unexpected alliance came from Lawrence Chen, his banker at First National. Despite the risk committee's decision, Lawrence arrived at Marcus's office unannounced, carrying a manila envelope. "I'm probably going to lose my job for this," Lawrence said, sliding the envelope across the desk. "But I can't be part of what they're doing." Inside were internal memos documenting pressure from Senator Reynolds and 2 Aerotech board members on First National's CEO to restrict TechVision's credit lines. The explicit goal: financial strangulation to force Marcus back to the merger table from a weakened position. "This violates at least 6 banking regulations," Lawrence explained. "I've already sent copies to the Federal Reserve and the Banking Commission." The banking documents were just the beginning. Within days of Marcus's television interview, his office was flooded with messages from other minority executives sharing similar experiences. "They did the same thing to me last year," revealed Omar Patel, CEO of a mid-size pharmaceutical company. "I was removed from an Aerosky flight the day before a major acquisition announcement. I thought it was just bad luck, but now I'm not so sure." One by one, executives who had remained silent about their experiences, fearing repercussions for their careers, began to speak out. Japanese, Indian, Latino, Black. The pattern transcended specific racial groups and targeted anyone these corporations viewed as a threat to their established order. More surprising were the white allies, who emerged from within the system itself. 3 vice presidents from Aerotech reached out confidentially, offering documents showing the company had systematically underpaid minority employees and blocked their advancement. A former Aerosky human resources director provided training, materials instructing staff how to manage passenger demographics in premium cabins. The whistleblowers formed an unofficial network, communicating through encrypted channels, sharing evidence of discriminatory practices that went far beyond Marcus's incident. Claire Robinson's potential class action lawsuit grew from hundreds to potentially thousands of plaintiffs. Meanwhile, Marcus's social media post about forging a new kind of corporate alliance based on ethical principles rather than just profit went viral, with the hashtag #JaDoBusinessWithDignity trending globally. Other executives began publicly pledging to avoid doing business with companies that had documented patterns of discrimination. The most powerful alliance, however, came from an unexpected direction. Thomas Zhang, founder of rival tech company Horizon Systems, and one of the few other black tech CEOs at Marcus's level, called personally. "They've been playing us against each other for years," Zhang said when they met privately. "Making us think there's only room for one of us at the top. I should have reached out sooner." Zhang had faced his own battles with systemic racism in Silicon Valley. Now he proposed joining forces not just in solidarity against discrimination, but in business. Horizon's complementary technology stack, combined with TechVision's innovations, could create an entity powerful enough to compete with the old guard without needing their approval or partnerships. "They want to keep us dependent on their systems, their funding, their approval," Zhang explained. "But together, we change the equation. We build our own ecosystem." As these alliances formed, Marcus received a crucial break from the forensic accountants. Eleanor Fisher's team had discovered that the same shell companies receiving mysterious consulting fees from Aerotech were linked to Senator Reynolds' campaign finances through a complex web of LLCs. "It's a sophisticated laundering operation," Fisher explained, pointing to the flowchart her team had created. Government contracts inflated by millions, percentage skimmed off to these shell companies, then funneled back to influence key decision makers who control more contracts and regulatory oversight. The corruption was breathtaking in its scope and audacity. It explained the ferocity of the response to Marcus's stand. He had unwittingly threatened not just a merger, but an entire shadow economy built on exploitation and influence peddling. When Marcus presented this evidence to his expanded alliance of executives, activists, and whistleblowers, the path forward became clear. This wasn't just about one incident on one flight anymore. It was about dismantling a system that had operated in the shadows for decades, using discrimination as just one of many tools to maintain control. They're powerful, but they're not invincible, Marcus told the assembled group. Their power depends on silence, on isolation, on making each of us feel alone in our experiences. Together, we end that silence today. The call Marcus had been dreading came at 2:47 a.m., jolting him from a rare moment of sleep in the executive suite he'd been using as temporary living quarters. Zoe Jackson's voice cracked with uncharacteristic emotion as she delivered the news. "William Chen has called for an emergency board meeting at 9 a.m., she reported. "He's invoking the Executive Stability Clause to request your temporary removal as CEO." Marcus closed his eyes, absorbing the betrayal. William had been his mentor, one of TechVision's earliest investors, and until now, his staunchest supporter on the board. For 30 years, they'd navigated crises together, built the company from nothing, celebrated each milestone. "He says, it's for your own good," Zoe continued, "that you need time to deal with the personal issues affecting your judgment. But Marcus, he's been meeting with Aerotech representatives privately. This isn't about protecting you." The betrayal cut deep, but it wasn't entirely unexpected. The opposition had been systematically isolating Marcus, targeting his allies one by one. William was simply the latest to fall. "We'll fight it," Zoe insisted. "We have shareholder proxies, legal grounds to challenge." "No," Marcus interrupted, a strange calm settling over him. "Let the meeting happen. I want to hear what they have to say face to face." The emergency board meeting felt like a carefully orchestrated execution. William Chen, elegantly dressed and solemn-faced, led the charge with rehearsed reluctance. "None of us question Marcus's extraordinary leadership over the years," he began, not quite meeting Marcus's eyes. "But recent events have created instability that threatens shareholder value. Our stock has dropped 22%. Major clients are expressing concerns about our focus and stability." On cue, Rebecca Winters, the newest board member, interjected with a list of clients who had paused or canceled contracts in the past week. Westfield Aerospace, Reynolds Defense Systems, Garner Technologies, all companies with direct ties to either Aerotech or Senator Reynolds. Marcus watched the performance unfold, noting how carefully they avoided mentioning the true reason for their actions. Not once did anyone say the words discrimination or racism. It was all couched in corporate euphemisms, distractions, public relations challenges, personal matters. As the discussion continued, Marcus's phone buzzed with an urgent message. From Claire Robinson. "Judge Harrington dismissed our class action lawsuit on procedural grounds. Called it frivolous. We're appealing, but it's a major setback." The coordinated assault continued throughout the day. Victoria reported that unknown individuals had vandalized Claire Robinson's office overnight, spray painting racial slurs and leaving a noose on her desk chair. The FBI was investigating it as a hate crime, but experience suggested such investigations rarely led to arrests when powerful interests were involved. By evening, Marcus faced the darkest moment since the crisis began. At a private meeting requested by Richard Phillips of Aerotech, the terms of surrender were laid out with brutal clarity. "This can all go away, Marcus," Phillips said, sliding a document across the table. "You signed this agreement, which includes your resignation as CEO, AIT, comprehensive NDA about all aspects of this situation, and an agreement not to pursue any legal claims. In exchange, the merger proceeds with TechVision's original valuation preserved, your severance package is tripled, and all these unpleasantnesses stop immediately." "And if I refuse?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then, unfortunately, things will likely get worse," Phillips replied with practiced regret. "I can't control all the players in this situation, but I know there are concerns about your family's safety, your wife's career, your daughter's future. A smart man knows when to fight and when to make a strategic retreat." The implied threat against his family made Marcus's blood run cold. Throughout his career, he'd calculated risks, made tough decisions, sacrificed when necessary. But this was different. This was surrender not just of a business position, but of his basic human dignity. As Marcus left the meeting without giving Phillips an answer, his phone rang with news that brought the crisis to its absolute nadir. Ayanna had collapsed at the hospital after working a 36-hour shift under extraordinary pressure. She was stable but unconscious, the doctors suspecting extreme exhaustion combined with severe stress. Rushing to the airport, Marcus found himself in a state of numbness. The system he'd fought so hard to succeed within had revealed its true nature. It would tolerate his presence as long as he played by its unwritten rules. But the moment he demanded basic respect, it would destroy everything he'd built, everyone he loved. For the first time, Marcus Washington considered surrender. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors. Ayanna was sleeping peacefully now, color returning to her face. The doctors assured Marcus she would make a full recovery with proper rest. Zara curled in a chair beside her, mother's bed, finally asleep after hours of terrified tears. In this moment of forced stillness, watching his family pay the price for his principles, Marcus reached a clarity he hadn't found in the chaos of the previous days. This wasn't just about him anymore. It wasn't even just about discrimination, on airlines or in boardrooms. This was about whether powerful forces could intimidate, threaten, and harm families with impunity whenever their interests were challenged. His phone vibrated with a text from Victoria. "Emergency meeting needed. New development. When can you talk?" Instead of texting back, Marcus stepped into the hallway and called her directly. "What's happened?" he asked. "Sheikh Abdullah from the Qatar Sovereign Wealth Fund called," Victoria replied, her voice animated with renewed energy. "He saw your interview and your social posts. He wants to meet privately." "Victoria, I'm at the hospital with Ayanna. I don't have time for investor meetings right now. Trust me on this one, Marcus. You need to take this meeting." 6 hours later, in a private suite at the Four Seasons, Marcus sat across from Sheikh Abdullah and his investment team. The Sheikh, a Harvard-educated businessman with progressive views, came straight to the point. "What you experienced is familiar to many of us who are not white Americans," he said. "The difference is you chose to fight back publicly. That takes courage I admire." The Sheikh's proposal was simple but revolutionary. The Qatar Sovereign Wealth Fund would provide $6 billion in financing, completely independent of American banking interests, to allow TechVision to pursue its strategic goals without the Aerotech merger. No connections to Senator Reynolds or his associates, the Sheikh emphasized. Just clean capital with standard investment terms. "We believe in your vision, Mr. Washington, and we believe ethical leadership is good business." This unexpected lifeline set in motion the boldest phase of Marcus's counterattack. With international financing secured, he reached out to Eleanor Fisher, whose forensic accountants had continued digging into Aerotech's financial irregularities. "We've found it," Fisher announced when they met in TechVision's secure conference. Aerotech has been systematically overbilling the Department of Defense on classified contracts for at least 7 years. The overcharges total approximately $1.8 billion. "Can you document it conclusively?" Marcus asked. Fisher nodded, sliding a thumb drive across the table. "Every transaction, every invoice, every actual cost versus billed amount. We've even identified the offshore accounts where they're hiding the difference." While Fisher's team had been following the money, Victoria had been executing another aspect of Marcus's masterstroke. Through a series of shell companies established in Singapore, TechVision had been quietly acquiring Aerosky stock at depressed prices following the viral incident. Within 2 weeks, they had accumulated a 17% ownership stake, not enough for control, but enough to demand board seats and transparency. The final piece came from Thomas Zhang of Horizon Systems. Their joint venture proposal, developed in absolute secrecy, would create a new entity combining TechVision's AI capabilities with Horizon's quantum computing platform. The resulting company would be valued at approximately $7.2 billion, a significant premium over the failed Aerotech merger. As these elements fell into place, social media erupted with the "Farc Stand with Marcus" campaign. Hundreds of thousands shared stories of discrimination in corporate settings, on transportation, in healthcare. the movement crashed Twitter's servers twice in one day, forcing the platform to acknowledge it wasn't just a hashtag but a global conversation about systemic inequality. The unexpected catalyst came in the form of a call from the White House. The president, facing re-election and sensitive to the growing public demand for corporate accountability, offered a private meeting with Marcus. "This has become a national conversation, Mr. Washington," the president acknowledged during their Oval Office meeting. "And while I can't comment on specific legal matters, I can tell you that the Justice Department takes allegations of corporate fraud, particularly in defense contracting, very seriously. With international financing, irrefutable evidence of fraud, strategic ownership in AeroSky, a groundbreaking new joint venture, and now the implicit support of the administration, Marcus was ready to launch his counteroffensive. The pieces were in place for a move so bold it would reshape the corporate landscape and send a message that would reverberate through boardrooms across America. The press room at TechVision's Chicago headquarters was filled beyond capacity. Every major financial news outlet, tech publication, and mainstream media organization had sent representatives. The announcement of an emergency press conference had triggered speculation ranging from Marcus's resignation to a hostile takeover of TechVision. What no one expected was the coalition of leaders who joined Marcus on the stage: Thomas Zhang of Horizon Systems, Sheikh Abdullah, Claire Robinson, and a somber-faced U.S. attorney flanked by FBI agents. Marcus approached the podium, the calm in his eyes belying the 7 days of meticulous planning that had led to this moment. "Good morning," he began. 7 weeks ago, I was forcibly removed from an AeroSky flight despite having a valid first-class ticket and identification. When I objected to this discriminatory treatment, I became the target of a coordinated campaign to silence me, threaten my family, and destroy my company. The room fell silent as Marcus continued, his voice steady and resolute. "Today, I'm announcing several decisions. First, TechVision is permanently terminating all merger discussions with Aerotech Industries. This is non-negotiable and final." Murmurs rippled through the press corps. Marcus waited for silence before continuing. "Second, I am providing the Department of Justice with comprehensive evidence of what appears to be systematic fraud in Aerotech's defense contracting, totaling approximately $1.8 billion over 7 years." At this, the U.S. attorney stepped forward to confirm that a federal investigation had been opened based on the evidence provided by TechVision's forensic accountants. "Third, I am announcing that TechVision and Horizon Systems are forming a strategic partnership valued at $7.2 billion, creating the world's first quantum AI platform with applications ranging from climate modeling to medical research." The announcement sent shockwaves through the room as reporters realized they were witnessing not the collapse of Marcus Washington's career, but its ascension to unprecedented heights. Fourth, through investment vehicles, TechVision has acquired a 17% stake in AeroSky Airlines. We are demanding board representation and a complete overhaul of their discriminatory practices. This is not about revenge, it's about transformation. Marcus paused, looking directly into the cameras. "Finally, I am establishing the Business Ethics and Inclusion Institute, funded with $100 million of my personal wealth, to address systemic discrimination in corporate America and create pathways for underrepresented groups in business leadership." As Marcus concluded his prepared remarks, the room erupted with questions. But the most dramatic moment came as breaking news alerts began lighting up phones throughout the audience. Aerotech's stock had plunged 70% on the Justice Department announcement. Trading was halted. Richard Phillips had resigned, effective immediately. 3 board members, including those with ties to Senator Reynolds, were also stepping down. The aftermath unfolded rapidly. Senator Reynolds announced he would not seek re-election, citing health concerns that emerged suspiciously quickly after federal investigators began reviewing his campaign finances. 4 Aerotech executives faced indictment for fraud. Judge Harrington recused himself from all cases involving TechVision after his financial ties to Aerotech were exposed. 1 month after the press conference, Marcus stood in his office reviewing the final paperwork for TechVision's acquisition of controlling interest in AeroSky. The airline stock, devastated by the scandal, had made the takeover surprisingly affordable. His first action as chairman would be installing new leadership committed to inclusive practices and accountability at every level. The final document that crossed his desk that day was a personal letter from Veronica Keller, the flight attendant who had initiated his removal from the plane. Now unemployed after Aerosky's initial damage control measures, she wrote seeking understanding, claiming she had only been following established procedures and meant no harm. As Marcus set the letter aside unanswered, his phone pinged with notifications about Veronica's latest unsuccessful job applications to other airlines. Her reputation now permanently linked to one of the most publicized instances of corporate discrimination in recent memory. Sometimes the price of dignity is measured in billions, Marcus had whispered while watching the viral video of his humiliation. He hadn't known then how prophetic those words would be, not just in the financial cost to those who had tried to break him, but in the transformation his stand would trigger across an entire business ecosystem. The system that had mobilized its full might to crush one man's demand for basic respect now lay exposed and vulnerable, its inner workings revealed, its power diminished. And Marcus Washington, who had entered that Aerosky flight as just another successful black executive forced to navigate a prejudiced world, had emerged as something far more significant. Proof that the system, no matter how entrenched, was not invincible. The true victory wasn't in the billions won or lost, the companies acquired or partnerships formed. It was in the thousands of messages that continued to flood Marcus's inbox daily. Because of you, I spoke up. Because of you, I didn't back down. Because of you, I remembered my worth. That, Marcus reflected as he looked out over the Chicago skyline, was the real reckoning. Not just accountability for those who had wronged him, but courage for those who would no longer accept being wronged in silence. Marcus Washington's journey teaches us that dignity is priceless, and standing up for it can transform not just your own life, but entire systems. His story reminds us that discrimination persists even at the highest levels of society, where power structures work to maintain the status quo by silencing those who challenge it. The lesson is clear. When faced with injustice, fighting back, though difficult and costly, can lead to greater change than quiet acceptance ever could. We learn that true power comes not from wealth or position alone, but from integrity, strategic thinking, and the ability to build alliances. Marcus succeeded because he refused to fight alone. He gathered allies across racial, professional, and international lines, creating a coalition stronger than any individual could be. His story teaches us that documentation is crucial. Recording incidents, gathering evidence, and exposing wrongdoing systematically can transform personal humiliation into systemic change. Perhaps most importantly, we learn that systems built on discrimination are inherently vulnerable. They survive through isolation and silence. When brave individuals speak out, connect with others who've faced similar treatment, and spotlight unjust practices, these systems begin to crumble. Marcus's victory wasn't just personal vindication. It was a blueprint for dismantling entrenched discrimination wherever it exists. What moment in this story resonated most with you? Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination that went unchallenged because speaking up seemed too costly? Comment below and let us know if you would have had the courage to walk away from a $4.1 billion deal to stand up for your dignity. If you believe more stories like this need to be shared, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives about standing up against injustice. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth. Remember, your dignity is never negotiable. Thank you for watching, and may you always find the strength to stand tall in the face of injustice.